The news that shook millions came with a heavy heart. Judge Frank Caprio, the man who became a global symbol of compassion in the courtroom, passed away at the age of 88. For many, he was not just a judge, he was a voice of kindness, in a world often filled with harshness. His passing left people in shock, but it was his funeral that truly captured the raw emotions of loss, especially when his son broke down during the farewell. That moment reminded the world of how deeply this man was loved, not just as a judge, but as a father, a husband, a grandfather, and a human being who touched lives in the simplest yet most powerful ways. Frank Caprio was not a typical television judge. He was different, and that difference is exactly what made him unforgettable. Through his show, Caught in Providence, millions across the world got to witness how justice could be served with empathy rather than arrogance. Instead of belittling those who stood before him, Caprio listened to them, laughed with them, and often wiped away their tears by giving them another chance. His courtroom was never about punishment alone. It was about understanding the struggles of ordinary people. This very human quality made him more than just a judge on a bench. It made him a symbol of fairness and hope. His journey to becoming that symbol was not easy. Caprio grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, in the neighborhood of Federal Hill. He was the second of 3 boys in a humble household. He knew from childhood what it meant to struggle, and perhaps that is why he never looked down upon those who came before him. Instead, he treated them with dignity. That dignity later became the foundation of his judicial philosophy. To him, the courtroom was not a stage for intimidation. It was a place where fairness, kindness, and compassion could live side by side with the law. Clips of his show spread rapidly across the internet, drawing over 1 billion views on social media. People watched in amazement as he spoke gently to frightened drivers, forgave struggling parents, and even invited children to his bench to help him make a ruling. He turned what could have been a moment of shame for many into a moment of comfort. In one unforgettable instance, he dismissed fines for a grieving mother who had just lost her son. Instead of focusing on her violations, he focused on her pain. In another case, he forgave a bartender who earned just $3 an hour for running a red light, reminding viewers not to exploit workers who already carried heavy burdens. These stories defined him, and through them, he became beloved. Far beyond Rhode Island, but even the most compassionate hearts cannot fight forever. In his later years, Caprio faced his hardest battle yet, a fight with pancreatic cancer. It was a painful and demanding illness, but he carried himself with the same strength he had shown throughout his life. Just a week before his passing, he shared a heartfelt video from his hospital bed. In it, he admitted to having a setback and asked people around the world to keep him in their prayers. That request touched his millions of fans, many of whom had once seen him as the man who gave hope to others. Now, it was the world's turn to give him that same hope back. Sadly, despite the prayers, Judge Caprio's time came to an end, and his family announced that he had passed away peacefully after a long and courageous fight. When the day of the funeral arrived, the atmosphere was heavy with grief, yet filled with gratitude for a life that had given so much to others. Family, friends, and admirers gathered to pay their respects. Political leaders, community members, and ordinary citizens stood side by side, united in mourning. The presence of Rhode Island's governor and other state leaders showed just how deeply respected Caprio was. Yet, amid all the official tributes and public statements, it was his son's voice that cut through the crowd and left the room silent. As his son stood to give a farewell, his emotions overcame him. He began speaking about his father not as a judge, but as the man who raised him, guided him, and loved him. The world had known Frank Caprio as the smiling, warm judge on the screen, but his son reminded everyone that behind that public figure was a father whose presence at home mattered just as much as his rulings in the courtroom. In that moment, his son broke down, his voice cracking under the weight of grief. Tears fell as he tried to capture in words the depth of a father's love that could never be replaced. That raw emotion reflected what millions felt watching from afar. It was not just a family that had lost a loved one. The world had lost one of its kindest judges. His family described him as a devoted husband, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and friend. They wrote that he was beloved for his compassion, humility, and unwavering belief in the goodness of people. Their words painted the picture of a man who lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind more than just legal rulings. He left behind a legacy of warmth and kindness. His son's emotional farewell captured this truth perfectly, showing that behind every public figure lies a private life filled with laughter, lessons, and love. Politicians and public figures also stepped forward with tributes. Rhode Island Governor Dan McKee said Judge Caprio was not only a public servant, but a symbol of empathy. He reminded people that Caprio's way of connecting with others was unique. It showed what was possible when justice was tempered with humanity. Those words highlighted a truth the world already knew. Frank Caprio had redefined what it meant to be a judge. He proved that law and compassion were not opposites. They could exist together and even strengthen one another. Even those who knew him outside the courtroom remembered him with deep affection. Robert Leonard, who once co-owned a restaurant with Caprio, said he was all around wonderful and that there was nothing Caprio wouldn't do for someone if he could help. These words reflected the everyday generosity of a man who never thought himself too important to lend a hand. He was admired not just for his public role, but for the simple ways he showed kindness in private life. That was perhaps his greatest quality. He was as genuine at home as he was in front of the camera. For nearly 40 years, Caprio served as a municipal judge in Providence before retiring in 2023. That service alone would have made his career remarkable. But what made him extraordinary was the way he transformed that bench into a symbol of humanity. He never forgot where he came from. He knew the struggles of working-class families because he had lived them. That is why he made sure that when someone stood before him, they were seen not just as a case number, but as a human being with a story. In one of his interviews in 2017, Caprio explained his philosophy. He said that justice should not be oppressive. He hoped people would take away the lesson that institutions of government can work well when they function with kindness, fairness, and compassion. His words felt prophetic, especially today when society often feels divided and contentious. He reminded people that it was possible to uphold the law without crushing the human spirit. That message will remain his most enduring gift to future generations. At the funeral, when his son broke down, the emotion spread across the room. Family members comforted each other, while mourners reflected silently on their own memories of Caprio. For many, his son's tears became a mirror of their own grief. People remembered watching his videos late at night, feeling comforted by the sight of a judge who cared. Others remembered standing in his courtroom, receiving not just a ruling but a moment of dignity. His passing felt deeply personal because, in one way or another, Judge Caprio had touched their lives. Even on social media, the reaction was overwhelming. Fans from across the globe flooded his pages with tributes. Some shared how his videos gave them hope during difficult times. Others remembered the exact moments when his compassion brought tears to their eyes. The most common theme among them was gratitude. Gratitude for the fact that a judge, sitting in a small courtroom in Rhode Island, had managed to teach the world that kindness is never wasted. The day ended with a sense of finality, but also with a powerful reminder. Judge Caprio's son, though broken by grief, managed to deliver words that captured his father's legacy. He said goodbye not only on behalf of his family, but on behalf of the countless people who had been touched by his father's compassion. The tears he shed that day were not just his own. They belonged to everyone who had ever been moved by Judge Caprio's kindness. Judge Caprio's passing also opened an important conversation about the role of compassion in justice. Many people compared him with other TV judges, noting how most courtroom shows focused on conflict, harsh words, and dramatic confrontations. Caprio's approach was the opposite. He created a space where ordinary people felt safe, even when they were in trouble. This comparison made his legacy stand out even more, proving that kindness could attract an audience far larger than anger ever could. At the funeral, speakers reminded the crowd of the billions of views his clips had gathered online. Those numbers were not just statistics. They represented moments where people from different cultures and countries felt connected by his humanity. In an era where social media often spreads negativity, Caprio had managed to spread hope. The fact that people as far as Asia, Europe, and Africa knew his name was proof that compassion speaks a universal language. His son's breakdown during the farewell was heartbreaking, not only for the family, but for everyone who admired Caprio. People in the room could feel the depth of the bond between father and son. The strength of his father's influence was clear in every word he struggled to say. That moment will likely remain in the memory of those who were present, as it symbolized both the pain of loss and the power of love. After the funeral, many in Rhode Island and beyond began calling for ways to honor Judge Caprio's memory. Some suggested scholarships in his name, while others pushed for community service initiatives inspired by his values. Local leaders discussed dedicating parts of the city to him, ensuring that future generations would remember the man who showed the world that justice can be human. These efforts reflected the shared belief that his story should not end with his death. In death, just as in life, Judge Caprio taught one last lesson: that true greatness does not come from power or position. It comes from how we treat others. It comes from choosing compassion when it would be easier to choose cruelty. His funeral became a moment of unity, where people of all backgrounds paused to honor a man who lived his values until the very end. And now the question remains: in a world often filled with division and harshness, who will carry forward the legacy of Judge Caprio? Will we remember his example only as a story from the past? Or will we choose to live with the same compassion he showed every day? That decision lies with us, and it will determine whether his legacy fades or continues to inspire for generations to come.